Imagine having to wear this, or ride this, or this. Well, join me as we take a look at some of the weird, the wacky, and the scariest triathlon kit through the ages. Right, imagine fully attaching yourself to your bike by a leash without the ability to quickly detach like you can with your pedals. Well, this is exactly what Mark Allen did in the 1987 Ironman World Champs. Now, the product wrapped around his waist and then attached to the front of the bike. The idea being to hold him in a good position, and by pushing back into the leash, he could generate more power. It was Steve Head, founder of Head Wheels, of course, that suggested this idea to Mark, having seen the Italians use it in the team time trial World Champs, taking gold and beating the Russians. Did it work? Well, only Mark can confirm that. He took another second to Dave Scott that year, and, well, we actually never saw him wearing it again. I mean, imagine having a spill whilst using one of these. Yikes. Well, needless to say, it didn't stay around too long, and I reckon that's probably for the best. Well, next up, that's horrible. What were they thinking? Well, this is the Speedo Speed Mask. Now, admittedly, not for triathlon really, thank goodness, but Speedo brought these out in the late 90s, a swim hat with goggles built in. Apparently this came off the back of research that suggested eye sockets create 20% of the resistance while swimming. So Speedo believed their mask would smooth out the turbulence between the cap and the goggle and improve the flow of water around the eye sockets by up to 53%. The Aussie swim team wore them to the 1998 World Champs in Perth, but unsurprisingly, they didn't take off too well. Okay, something a little more present day, the Ceepo Shadow-R. Part of me loves this bike, whilst the other is absolutely terrified by it. In 2018, we witnessed this unidentified flying object nipping around Kona, and honestly, it makes the Specialized Shiv look like a town bike in comparison. Whilst the frame is pretty wild in itself, it is the horizontal fork that really has us trembling. The idea was to remove the leading edge of the forks and replace them with this horizontal fork. As I say, part of me applauds Ceepo for giving this a go. I love that, but please don't ask me to ride it. Now, you can be forgiven for not knowing anything about this product because it didn't hang around too long. Around 1990, the seat shifter was released, and it was used by the best. Mike Pigg was quoted as saying, "I've never felt this much power." Dave Scott even used one. Now, the idea was that you could literally change your position and biomechanics whilst riding. A forward position for the aero bars, and then at the flick of a switch, push the saddle back for climbing, for example. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a great idea. I mean, it is. Many people loved it. I guess until it stops working or you have play in the connection between the saddle and that shifter. Now, I've got to say, it's definitely something I would be keen to try these days if we can fit one to modern seat posts. We did actually recently see Magnus Ditlev using a dropper post in Nice, so perhaps watch this space. Well, another polarizing bike, the Diamondback Etienne. In 2016, Diamondback, a brand better known for bargain BMXs, appeared almost out of nowhere with this. Now, I don't want to offend anyone here, but it is quite an intimidating bike. It's designed all around what they call the aero core, filling the central section between the wheels to create a large airfoil. Anyway, for those of you that also find this bike somewhat intimidating, you'll be pleased to hear that Diamondback actually decided to discontinue it fairly soon after. Now, we can't discuss bikes without talking about suspension in triathlon bikes. Yep, you heard me right. Now, to be clear, this is actually pretty cool, and we see hints of this technology in current bikes, just perhaps not quite as extreme. Now, in the 90s, triathlon bikes featuring suspension became incredibly popular. The thought was that by providing some give in the bike, it would improve comfort and keep the legs feeling fresh. There were a number of wacky designs, such as the Principia, that basically looked like a downhill mountain bike, but the most popular by far was the Allsop Soft Ride. In fact, in 1996, almost 15% of the field at the Ironman World Championships were riding a soft ride. Okay, time to talk fairings. By definition, a fairing is an external structure added to increase streamlining. And we've seen some pretty wild examples over the years, including this lumbar support from Cell Italia that clearly doubled as a fairing. Whilst in triathlon we're not constrained by the UTO rulebook, fairings are technically prohibited. So this has led to athletes and brands becoming creative with designs and the use of products to create such fairings, like the chest fairing. But it's just hydration down the front of the suit, right? Nothing illegal there. Or the massive rear hydration mount like we saw on Magnus's bike. But I think it's fair to say the one that takes the trophy has to be Joe Skipper using 2 elite chrono bottles wrapping around his forearms with his face tucked in between. Our triathlon suits were first developed in the late 80s, and whilst they were a huge step up in quality from what they had been using, they were a far cry from the suits we use today. Now, much like the Ceepo Shadow-R, I respect the innovation and creativity of this particular design. I mean, why settle for 1 zip on your wetsuit when you can have 2? And why not have it going all the way down to your ankle? If you are looking to combine stripping with triathlon, the Peel Triathlon wetsuit may be for you. And finally, these aren't necessarily hideous designs, but I would call them flaws or frustrations that many of us have had with our kit, and I've certainly experienced. For example, integrating rim brakes. Brands will neatly tuck a rim brake behind a cover on the steerer or under the bottom bracket. The problem is, half the time these covers don't allow the brakes to open enough, so you would spend endless hours taking these covers on and off, trying to get it just right, only to hear the brake rubbing mid-race. And then there's a lack of steering stops, allowing you to turn your handlebars all the way around. You might wonder why this is an issue. Well, as many of us have found out on certain bikes, quite a lot is wrong with that. I broke a couple of aero fins off my old Specialized Transitions. I've seen others snap covers or simply gouge a load of paint off their lovely bike. If you have any other examples, let us know in the comments section down below, and we'll see you next time. Give it a thumbs up.